Welcome to the Page Turnerz podcast, where book lovers unite to celebrate the enchanting world of fiction. With your host, Paul A. Brooks. In each episode, we'll dive into the captivating realms of storytelling, exploring the pages that transport us to magical places and introduce us to unforgettable characters. In each episode, we'll embark on a creative expedition through the minds of seasoned and emerging writers to unravel the mysteries and unveil the passion that fuels their stories. Join us on this odyssey through the pages and pixels of imagination, where words become worlds and stories illuminate our lives. So, pour yourself a coffee and immerse yourself in discussions about writing, gripping plots, heroes and villains, and the sheer joy of escaping into a well-crafted story.
On today's show, I'm talking with Jeffrey Yorio, writer of flash fiction, poetry and fiction novels. Now, despite some minor technical issues, we talked about his publishing career and writing. He gave us a great tip for outlining a novel, and he talked about his two novels, Sundowners, Vampires Are Only Human, and Sundowners, Vampire Secrets. Now, please like and subscribe to our channel so we can continue to bring you great books from talented authors. This is Jeffrey Yorio. Hi, Jeff, and thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the podcast. It's really nice to meet you. I mean, we've been backwards and forwards with the emails for a while, so yeah, it's great to finally meet you.
Yeah. Greetings, Paul. It's a pleasure on my end, and thank you for inviting me in to meet with you and discuss with your readers as well.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. So you are in is it Rochester, New York?
Rochester, New York, the southern shore of Lake Ontario.
Yeah,
in the Finger Lakes region.
Yeah, I can see, we were talking earlier on, I can see in the background that the sun's out, and it's actually just out here for the first day in the UK where we can really call it a summer day. So yeah, it's lovely. It's nice to sort of be able to talk in the sunshine as opposed to having the lights on, which I don't have on today, which is good. So we're going to talk about your two novels, Sundowners, which is, as I said to you earlier, is such a cool name, but it doesn't mean what I thought it meant when I first read it. So we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about the two books that you've got out right now. But you've written quite a lot as well, haven't you, in the past? What have you sort of written before?
I've had a short story and some flash fiction published in the past. There's a book that I'm in, which is out, an anthology. I've got 2 stories and 2 poems in it. So I've had some pleasantly enjoyable, success as far as other people accepting the words I've written or the worlds I've created to share.
Yeah, that's great. Poetry. So how did you find that? Is that something that you've always been interested in, or is it something that you kind of recently discovered? So I kind of asked you about poetry. If you want to kind of sort of go over what you've just said, that'd be great.
Yeah. No, I never thought about writing poetry. To me, poetry was stone walls don't a prison make, or iron bars a cage, and that was where it started and ended. The writing group I was in was having a poetry thing, and I found out that April is National Poetry Month.
All right.
So I said, okay, what the heck? I'll try it, And I found out that I like poetry. There are things I can do with poetry that I can't do in writing the story. I can ignore some punctuation. I can ignore some grammar. I can bend the rules a lot more in poetry than I can in writing. And I go, wow, this is great for me. And so I found it relaxing. I would always come up with, as with my books have twists and bends as far as what they're about. Same with my poems.
Yeah, it's such a joy. I know exactly what you're talking about with kind of bending the rules, because part of my stories there, I write quatrains, a bit like Nostradamus, those kind of prophecy things. And the opportunity to play with the stanzas and play with the rhythm and the rhyme is just so nice. And you can forget grammar and you can forget commas, which are the bane of my life, quite honestly. I know we were talking a little bit about that before we came on camera. And last week when I was talking to Ashley Postman, she gave me the best advice about commas. She just said, think about where there's a natural breath. Where there's a natural breath, there's a comma. And I thought, do you know what? That makes total sense. And I hadn't thought of it like that before. But yeah, and that's why I like that kind of the poetry side of things as well. I also try to, when I'm writing my stories, I always try to make not write them sort of lyrically or poetically, if you like, but to make them very easy to write, to read. So they've got a nice cadence, a nice flow to them. So sometimes I take quite a bit of time over, a sentence just to make sure it's really easily read, which is kind of my thing, I suppose. So that comes from that poetic, and so it's a really nice thing to do, I think. So you've written quite a few short stories. You've got some flash fiction out there and some poetry, which is great, and your two novels, which we're going to come to shortly. But what is your and I ask this of everybody actually. Are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
I'm like 90% pantser.
Good.
What I will do is I will, when I have an idea for a story, and not so much a short story, but a book or a longer one, novelette or longer, I will use PowerPoint to create like a mini storyboard.
Oh wow! Okay.
And I'll make my circles will be the plot, the major plot scene. In a brief description of who's there and what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'll just fill the screen with these plot points. Then I'll go back and I'll say, okay, which is first, which is second, which is third, and I'll number them so the order. And then I'll draw dark lines or dotted lines to indicate connection between the points, strong or weak. And then in the process of doing that, I may say, okay, what I got down for 4, I have to move to 2, and then 2 has to become 3. And then when I'm done with that, then I will go write. I know my characters' names. I have rough descriptions for them. I have, I know how I have a much better handle in my mind of how it starts versus how it ends. And then I just go from there. And when I complete that, I now have my rough draft, and I'll get rid of my storyboard at that point. And I'll have my rough draft, and then from there I'll go. It's in book form, but I'll do it that way. And because for me, I'm not writing the plot point that I made in PowerPoint. I'm writing the movie scene that I see up here. And that has gotten me into trouble. As far as writing goes, no, you can't write that. You don't see it. You can't write it. It's too much words. You got to cut. You got to this. And they were right, but I had to write what was up here about the scene description I had on the thing. And then when I was done, it's done. And now I have a working outline in book form in front of me.
What a great idea.
So that's how I do that.
Yeah, using PowerPoint. I hadn't thought about that, but what a great idea. I mean, that's a tool that's pretty much free that we've all got. I hadn't thought about using that. That's a really good idea. That's great. So once you've got this sort of rough outline then, do you have a sort of a writing routine? I mean, are you disciplined? Do you sort of lock yourself away in a room and put music on, or how do you write?
I'll write in the morning, generally. Sometimes at night, but in the morning or late at night, I can find the kitchen or sitting in my chair. I can find it. There aren't others around to interrupt. Now, will I have a TV on sometimes for background noise? Yes, absolutely. I might have some music playing for background, but physical interruptions, I minimize. That's why writing during the morning is my preferred time to write. Yeah. If an idea comes to me at work, I have the notes function on my phone. There we go. I've even learned how to do voice to text using notes. After a couple of years, someone says, "What are you doing?" Well, I'm writing down the idea I came up with for a story. Well, just talk to the phone. I go, but I'm not talking to anyone. They go, no. It's called voice to text. They showed me how to do it, and thank you very much.
Wow, that's it. See, I don't. I have this. I take this everywhere with me, just to take. I'm kind of old school in that respect, and I love it, and I like to write it because I find sometimes that physically writing something down gives you a slightly different perspective, a slightly different feel than when you're typing away on the keyboard. So I have tried to record. And Chris Fox, the sort of sci-fi writer, he writes lots of other stuff. He wrote 5,000 words an hour, that book. That's what he does. He dictates it. I thought, wow, okay. But I can't. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't feel right. That's why I have this little notebook and all that sort of
stuff. I'll dictate the ideas when they come up with them if I'm not at home, but I won't dictate anything which I'm actually writing for the story or for a book. I'll use the keyboard for and go with that. Because just like me, I'm much more comfortable with this. Because I know down the road, my characters are going to come to me one night and say, "What the hell did you just write about me in that book? We got to have a discussion here about this."
Yeah.
So that, and that's why I have it as the way I do it. I'm a very visual oriented person. And I like to use my strengths. I never had any formal training. I'll even freely admit that when it comes to English, as far as in school and high school, it was probably my worst subject. My parents were very surprised that in 12th grade English, I'm all of a sudden getting B's. And they're like, "Oh, you're good at English." I said, "No, we're reading plays and we're reading books and I'm writing summaries and I'm doing this. I'm not writing, even I can make a good grammatical punctuation term paper in 10 weeks. Even, that's not beyond my capability. But it's not like I'm having to structure a sentence and take this apart. And I go, so that's why getting English literature was senior English for me.
Yeah.
And so, we read Milton, we read, Romeo and Juliet, and give your opinion, summarize it. What's it about? That was easy for me. You want me to diagram a sentence, subject, verb, consonant? No, can't do it.
No.
And so that was why I will avoid a weakness and emphasize the strength. When I got older, I picked up a master's, and one of the things in the master's, it was a master's in operations management. They said it's easier to improve a strength than it is to improve a weakness.
Right.
In a process flow. So I'll take the same perspective in writing. I'll work on my strength. I'll write to my strengths and not overly be concerned about my weaknesses. I knew the more I would write, the more I would read, my spelling, my grammar, that will improve. It will never become a strength, but it won't become as bad a weakness.
For me, that's pretty much what editors are for. They'll take the story and say, "This is good, this is grammatically incorrect, this needs to be changed," etc., etc. So yeah, I rely quite heavily on an editor to make sure that it's, the punctuation, the spelling, although spell checker is a great tool. And all that sort of stuff. That's what she does for me. So that's great. Yeah, I could do that. But yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that way, that you can improve your strengths easier than you can improve your weaknesses. What a great thing to think about. That's really good. Yeah, that's good. So do you write a specific number of words per day? Are you kind of that disciplined? I mean, I know you said you're pretty much sort of on the pantser end like me, but I tried to do the spreadsheet and track all the words that I was writing per day and sort of set this target of 1,500 to 2,000 words a day. I think I met that once when I was actually writing. Do you do something like that, or do you just write to
Nope. I write the scene in my head that I had.
Right.
Now, I don't have a set word count. I have a scene. If that scene takes 2,000 words, if that scene takes 3,000 words, I'm writing the scene. I don't want to box myself in by saying, well, I have to write X number of words and today or for the scene or for this. I'm writing a book that I don't have any idea how long it's going to be. So I'm going to write the scene. Okay. Now, it's obviously going to be more than what I had down on my little, PowerPoint thing, but I'm writing that scene. Whatever comes to me. I mean, yes, I've thought more about it. I know where they are. I know what the situation is, who's involved. So I have all that built in. It's like, okay, few notes, let's go right.
Yeah.
And so it's when I'm done with the scene. Now, I may keep on going to the next scene. I don't limit myself in that regard, but my intention is when I start, to write scene A. And if I end up going to scene B, I go to scene B. I don't worry about that. I write until it's like, okay, I've reached a point where I'm not sure what I want to say anymore. So I stop.
Good idea. That's good. Do you leave yourself like a little note at the end of what you've written to kind of prompt you in the direction for the following day, or when you sit down to write again?
What I do is when I finish the writing, I'll say end of bubble, whatever, from the bubbles from my storyboarding PowerPoint thing I had. Brilliant. So I'll know where I ended. And that's why I don't get rid of that until I've written the entire first draft.
That's really
then
good.
I don't need it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Do you find that your stories often go as a pantser, that your stories don't always follow the storyboard that you've kind of created? Does it go off on tangents?
Yes. Yeah. They do change. Not so much in the beginning part, but they'll change as I get in, because something else is kind of, oh, hey, that would be good to put in here. But then the ripple effect, you throw a stone into a pond and you watch the ripples expand. Yeah. So a little change here, how does that impact downstream? And it does.
Yeah.
I actually had not so much the end scene, but the big fight. There's a fight scene near the end of book 1. I wrote that 4 times before I had it where I wanted it. And each time was almost a different outcome than how it came out, how it ended up.
Wow.
So, and I'm not worried about that, because I don't want to box myself in. I just want, how does it flow? I am a storyteller who writes. I'm not a writer who tells stories.
Right. Yeah.
And I want the flow with the story, because that's what the reader's reading. The reader's reading the story I've created in Sundowners. I want them to be involved with the characters. I want them to the scenes, the settings. I want of whatever story. I want them to be involved with that. Yeah. And if I have to keep that flow going. And that's why if something changes, then it changes, but it has to. But in my mind, I'm keeping the flow, which is, as say, the shows you have with the editors. I know what the story is.
Yeah.
That does. But sometimes I keep forgetting the reader doesn't. Now, it's okay. You don't want the reader to know, but you want the reader to not be confused in the process of reading the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find then that when your story or story changes direction, is it the character that drives that, or is it a situational change? Because I'm sitting here thinking, what does it say about us when we sit for hours talking to people in our heads that don't exist? So do your characters make those changes?
It's both character and situational. There was one scene which I changed about the middle or so of the book, later half, where some of the antagonists are discussing something, and I'm going for it. I go, you know what they're talking about makes perfect sense in the book.
Yeah,
but they're not talking about it against a white background. They're talking about it someplace, and so I changed from where they were doing that to a restaurant. And it just made more sense.
Yeah.
It added a little bit more, because now, okay, they order food, order this. I wanted to make it like you go into a restaurant, a family type restaurant, and you look at the menu. You may go, hey, what would you recommend here? I'm visiting in town or something. Yeah. And I wanted that whole aspect to be there.
Wow, that's really good. So, well, we need to talk about Sundowners then. So let's get on to those. So because
okay,
the Sundowners doesn't, because when I first saw it, I thought Sundowners is another name for a vampire, but it's not, is it? And that surprised me of what it is, and I think that's a really nice twist to that. But the title and your subtitle, Sundowners, Vampires Are Only Human, is such a good title for a book. I really enjoyed reading that. I immediately wanted to know more. I just had to. So that's really good. So can you tell us, let's start with the first book. Let's start with Sundowners, Vampires Are Only Human. Let's start with that one. Without kind of, without giving it away, Can you kind of tell us the story and what we can expect as a reader?
Well, I'll start with how I came up with the story, with the idea for the story. Because an idea is like an acorn. An acorn is not an oak tree yet, so the idea is not a story yet. Mm-hmm. The writing group I was on had a chat box where you could just ask questions, talk online, no big deal. One of the questions that came up with was, where did the myth of the vampire come from?
Right.
That's a good question. Where did it come from? And I'm a history major out of college. I'm thinking and go, oh, okay, well, and so I wrote back, well, maybe back in the day when science did not know what science knows now, rabies might have been what people thought vampires were. If you get rabies, you get a pallor to your skin, you don't like the sun, your body inhibits pain receptors, so you're stronger than you actually are. Because pain is a way when you're doing something, your body trying to tell you, don't do this anymore, you could hurt yourself. Mm-hmm. You ignore those. Just like a junkie on meth or something, they're just stronger. They ignore certain things.
Yeah.
Pain yourself. So I'm like, so maybe rabies might have been where it came from. What animals are associated with rabies? Rats, bats, and wolves.
Yeah.
Same thing associated with it. So I figured, well, maybe that was it. And so I'm like, oh. And so that got me thinking. I said, okay, what if or could vampires exist in the real world? And I'm like, well, if they exist according to the myth, and Dracula, the book Dracula was based on the real person, Vlad Dracula of Clan Draculeste, who was also called Vlad Tepes, and Tepes means the impaler. Mm-hmm. So it was Vlad the Impaler. So it was based on him. And so I'm like, okay, so if I'm gonna, I need a different vampire, because if your neighbor always works the night trick, if they always ask permission to come into your house, those would seem to be red flags throughout the course of history that, wow, there's a vampire living next door to me. And they'd be an endangered species real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how could a vampire exist? And yet, can I still have a vampire that goes along with the myth and is believable? Mm-hmm. Because, Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, had said something to the effect that the difference between fiction and nonfiction is that fiction has to be totally believable.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I started jotting down some ideas about, well, how can I have a different vampire? My dad, before he passed away, he was a podiatrist. So I talked to him about some medical questions that I had, blood and stuff like that. And he answered it, because Google can give me an answer. It doesn't give me the reason or anything else. My dad can fill in the blanks along those lines. Mm-hmm. So I had my notes and this and that. And there was a good friend of mine, a horror writer by the name of Brian Fatah Steele. And if you like horror, I'd recommend them. I said, Brian, what do you think about these notes for a vampire story? And I got it back about a day later, and it only had the words, write this effing story.
Yeah.
So I did. And so I did. And I based my vampires on a mutation. I have no magic. I have no pact with the devil in my story. Mm-hmm. Vampires are a mutation of anemia. Now, anemia is basically you have more white blood cells in your system than you do red blood cells. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's an imbalance. The common test for anemia is they take your blood sample, run it through a centrifuge machine, and they examine the proportion of red blood cells to white blood cells. That's all they do. And if you have X or higher of the white blood cell count, you're an anemic. So my vampires are by definition an anemic, but the mutation is in an anemic, the white blood cells are immature. They don't help the immune system.
Right.
My mutation has them as mature white blood cells. They do help the immune system. And so then I had to attach other things to it. So, okay, now I can explain how they're resistant to certain things because they have a better immune system than the average human. So then when people you get stronger, you work out. And it's not that you get more muscle tissue. You have your muscle tissue, your muscle cells become bigger. You stop working out, they shrink back to their normal size. There are two types of muscle tissue, fast twitch and slow twitch. Slow twitch is your endurance muscle. It lets you do something 6, 8, 10 hours a day, and you're tired, but you're not tuckered. You're not pooped out. You may say you are, but you're not. The fast twitch muscle is the energy muscle. And my dad explained it to me. He says, the cheetah, it can go 60 miles an hour for short bursts to catch prey. And then it's spooked, but it can go 60 miles an hour. And so my vampires have the fast twitch muscle tissue instead of the slow twitch muscle tissue.
Right.
Hence, they're now stronger. And so now that I have that, I can now go into other things. I looked at the vampire myth and I say, okay, fangs are not straws. If a fang is hollow, it's not going to serve its purpose, which is to be a neck opener to get to the blood.
Right.
So I did that. And in the original Dracula, he could go outside during the day. That's been maybe a forgotten aspect of the book. He was weaker, but he could go outside. My vampires can go outside. Give them a good sunscreen, they go to the beach, but so they actually are human. So that was my thinking. I'm like, they're human. I'd written a poem where I'm like, is the reflection we see of ourselves in the mirror us, or is it the image of our soul looking back at us?
Oh, okay. Wow.
And so I said, okay, what the thing we have with vampires is that the monster within us, the monster outside of us. And so I wanted to tie all that in. So that came for the basis. Now I have a new vampire, one that fits the myth, but isn't the myth. And so I came up with part of my advertisement I've been doing marketing is, what if vampires created their own myth? And every myth has some truth at its core. What truth would they have hidden inside the myth? So some older vampires can go a little feral. They revert. The smell of blood just triggers something in their brain, and they revert. And they have to get blood. They have to have their fix. And once they get their fix, they're back to normal. They don't remember what they did. They may see the evidence of what they did. Oh God, it happened again. The more that happens, the more they become the monster.
Right.
And so within the books, I now have two groups of vampires, traditionalists and modernists, and both watch out for vampires that have gone feral for different reasons.
Right.
And so so now with the book, now I can write the story.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have a traditional story. I don't have werewolves in my story. I got them reserved for another book I'm working on. And so I didn't have a horror per se. I had a mystery. Why is this going on? What is doing here? And that, which is what I wanted. I can now go into a mystery involving vampires and what's going on. And in the process of the history, you will find that there are changes I made in our history for the book. And so there's the basic premise for Sundowners, Vampires Are Human.
Yeah.
It's to introduce them, let everyone see what's going on, and then I get to the second book.
Yeah, that's a really good way of describing Sundowners, Vampires Are Only Human without giving the story away. That's really good. Yeah, excellent. So tell us about the next book then. Tell us about Vampire Secrets, which is the next follow-on, presumably. Yeah.
Tell us it's the second book. My plan is to do 3 or 4. I'm working on 3, but I'm only a few thousand words in, and it's harder because now I got 2 books I have to look back at when I'm starting to write 3. So in the first book, I end with a cliffhanger about a secondary character and a main character. In book 2 starts out with another main character, Agate, in a different location than where she was when book 1 ended.
Yeah.
And she's talking to a person who she calls her sister. It's not her blood sister, but we all had them. We all had cousins that we grew up with that we considered more of a brother than a cousin because we were so close and did stuff. And that's the relationship those two have. And her sister starts finding out that she kept secrets from her and important secrets from her.
Yeah.
And the fallout of that is what starts on with the second one. I bring in a new antagonist at the very start. In the first one I have a prelude. In the second one I have a prelude and a preface. In the preface for the second book, I have Agate describing vampires and the difference of my vampires versus the myth. So in case anyone picked up the second book to read, they at least have that one. And then I have the prelude, which sets the stage for who the antagonist is going to be.
Okay.
In the second book. And I won't go into the details, but I like using natural places and stuff.
Yeah.
And all. So the prelude for book 2 starts at a place called Lake St. Anna in Romania, which happens to be a lake which is only filled by precipitation. There's no rivers in there and out. Beautiful place from the pictures, but that's where it is. And everything starts coming out in book 2 from there. Some stuff gets going on. The new antagonist is starting to stir the pot because she is out for revenge on her part because of something that happened to her. And I end up leaving the confines of the state of Ohio in the United States from book 1 and traveling to Europe.
Wow.
2 major locations I spend my time in. One is Edinburgh and the other is Novesto something. It's in Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria area, down in that part of the Balkans. And again, I kind of resolve things, but don't resolve it. But you see how stuff comes. It's, a secret that you have. You don't tell anyone. You think you're doing the right thing by not telling anyone these secrets because you don't want, it's secret. And boom. When I'm in Edinburgh, I twist the legend of Deacon Brodie.
Okay.
Into the book and have Deacon Brodie as a vampire. He still dies as he did historically, but I twist him into a vampire and have some stuff going on with that. Now I've never been to Edinburgh, so after I had done all my research about the city and the aspect I was looking at, one of my friends who was from England had told me that that's pretty good as far as research goes.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned is that this lady, she kind of dressed me down. She goes, Scottish is not the language. It's Scots Gaelic, not Scottish.
And
I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I did not know. Please don't be angry at me. But even I learned stuff, one about it is I'm doing it, tie some stuff in, and I just go with that. Yes, the love interest from book 1 continues on into book 2. You find out more about the love interest from book 1 in book 2, and other things get rearranged as to what's going on, and I have fun with it.
Yeah.
One of the characters in the first book is Gina, and Gina happens to be the artificial intelligence of Zephyr's computer, his mainframe in Venice, but it's link attached to his laptop, and so Gina has a personality. Gina, as you will see, can be very, I'm going to say, pertinent. She can be very uppity at times.
Okay.
With Zephyr or with others, and so I there's a little comic relief that goes on with Gina in book 1 and with book 2, and I just wanted to have fun writing the book, but yet answering the questions I could from book 1, creating some more questions in book 2.
Yeah.
And all. So that's where there's book 2 basically picks up half a year or so after book 1 in a time frame, and I just enjoyed the flow. It was easy. I was able. The first book took me 6 years.
Right. I was going to ask you. Yeah.
The next one took me just 2, but originally I wanted to do a prequel in book 1. That was where the new antagonist comes from. But I said, you know what? I'm just going to ignore part of it, but take this other bunch of information I had for that and move that into book 2. So that's why it didn't take me as long for 2 as it did for 1.
Yeah.
Also, book 2 become long. Book 1's like 48,000 words, and book 2 is 70.
Right. Oh, isn't that amazing though? Because you the second book took you a third of the time, and you had more fun with it potentially. Consequently, wrote it much more quickly. But I think there's that natural follow on, isn't there? From the, I wouldn't say the ending of book 1, but the point where book 2 picks up. And then your mind just goes, and you can just get it down much more quickly, which is that's really good. So book 3, you've said you've started that. You got a couple of thousand words in on book 3.
Correct.
Yeah, that's really good. So when can we expect that one? End of this year?
Oh, book 3. Oh, no. My current itinerary is I'm shifting to, there's some science fiction stuff I'm going to put out.
Oh, right. Okay.
I have 2 completed drafts, sci-fi fiction drafts done. One is a space opera. The other is an alternate history, an Italian invasion of the island of Malta in 1940 during World War II.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then I have some science fiction shorts, which I set in the same universe as the space opera, but they don't cross over with it.
Right.
That what's going on is a backdrop. Those 2 may cross over, and those I plan on releasing as like 7,000 to 8,000 word episodes.
Right. 2
different storylines. And then after that, I got my whips, the ones I'm writing, which is Sundowners 3, and then my witch, warlock, lichen, and gargoyle story.
Yeah. Wow. So you've got a lot going on. So the stories that you're writing, or the short stories, where are you going to publish those?
Those at this point, I'm going to put them only out as ebooks. So I'm going to, I don't really need my own ISBN, but so I'm going to I'll go Amazon, Smashwords, Barnes and Noble online, because you can get both my first 2 books at Amazon, Barnes and Noble online, trade paperback and ebook. If you want the ebook, it's on Kobo, Smashwords, because I own the ISBN for those 2.
Right. Lovely. What I wanted to ask you about was the covers, particularly, because they're really good. I really like them. Who did your covers for you? Where did you get them done?
His name is Juan Padron. Let me just double check. Oh, I got that here.
Have you got a copy of the book, or both of them?
Well, I got a copy of the ARC, my proof copy.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Writers only ever seem to have proof copies. That's all I've got. I haven't actually got a.
No, his name is Juan Padron, and online at juanjpadron.com.
Wow. Okay.
And so I found the covers for both books there. When I found the one for book 1, I said, well, can you make an edit? There were a couple things that he had on the picture there. I said, can those be removed? Yeah, no problem. And so he had it, and then did the, the little black to red, the blood as far as the titling and everything. And you got the little red circle in the eye.
Yeah.
And so it was just, I didn't want a vampire on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the cover to be regret.
Yeah.
So it is one of the characters in my mind. It is the character of Agate crying. And so you may pick up on the reason, you may not, when you read it, as to why she's in there, because of the interaction she has with what's going on and everything. And so that's what that one is, as far as why that cover. Yeah. And then in the other cover, I just wanted to show the secrets, like the monkeys.
It does show
I wanted something like that to show, well, and the difference is in the eye that you can see in the second cover, it's just black. There's no pupil. There's no thing. So that's what I wanted. And again, that's one of the characters from the second book too, in my mind.
Right.
But that one is the new protagonist or the new antagonist.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Wow.
So I wanted, that's how I involved, because I know, even when I started, though I knew nothing about marketing, I knew from my own personal experience, when I would go to buy a book, if I like the cover, I'm reading the back cover blurb.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plain and simple.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And then I'm going to go from there. I'm like, no, do I know the author? Have I read the author before? And in there, do I expect the cover to actually be a scene from the book? No, I don't. If it is, great. If it's not, no, that doesn't matter. But as long as it somehow is involved in the book versus a scene from the book, that's what's important to me. And that's what I want to do. My oldest daughter was saying, that's a good minimalist cover. I'm like, minimalist? She goes, yes, it's an art term, don't worry about it, but it's a minimalist. And also get to my oldest daughter, when she go over and she goes, Daddy, promise me you won't have your vampire sparkle. And I looked at her, because I had no clue at that time what she was talking about.
Yeah.
Not a clue in the world. Because in my mind, I go, why would a vampire sparkle? And I said, okay, dear, I promise my vampires won't sparkle. I found out. But at that time, I did not know.
Yeah.
So
that's they're great covers. I mean, that was Sundowners, Vampires Are Human. When I saw that image and then read the title, which when I spoke to Shreya Gupta, a cover designer, last week actually, or the week before, and she was talking about visual hierarchy and the effects of the image and the text. And it had that effect on me when I looked at your cover, and I thought, I want to know more about that. And as you said quite rightly, I wanted to read the back blurb. I wanted to find out more about it. That initial draw was the image and the title and its subtitle, because as I said, it's so good. And it, then when you start reading more about it and you read the beginning, Sundowners doesn't mean what I thought it meant originally, which is another really good surprise for it. And so I really enjoyed it in that respect. So before we kind of wrap things up here, you touched on reading earlier on. Are you reading anything at the moment? I mean, for me, we were saying I've tried to expand my reading profile, if you like. I'm reading a horror book at the moment. I'm reading some sci-fi at the moment. I've just read a memoir. I've never read a memoir before. And it's so fascinating to kind of understand how other people write and to listen to their stories. I just found that absolutely fascinating. So I'm really enjoying sort of expanding my my sort of genres of reading, which is great. What are you reading at the moment? Are you reading anything particular?
There's a book by an indie author called C.S. Ratliff, and I forget its title. And forgive me, it has to do with lightning, and it's a fantasy book, has to do with lightning. I forget the exact title. C.S. Ratliff. I'm reading that. I'm also there. There's an old fantasy series called Thieves' World, edited by Robert Asprin. I'm going back and I'm reading that too. That's a multi-book series, and doing that right now, plus writing my own. So I'm only currently reading two.
Sure. But yeah, I mean, yeah. Isn't that funny? I seem to read multiple books at the same time. Do you find that when you're reading a book that you sort of look at it critically as a writer, or does it almost not spoil the story, but does it make the story harder to understand? But sort of you look at it from a writer's perspective rather than a reader. Do you find that?
I don't look at it critically like an editor or no, that's good, that's bad.
Yeah.
I look at it from how they structured their book and their story.
Right.
So I can learn to see how others are put together. So, if I see a misspelled word or something, that doesn't overly bother me. If I'm seeing that like several every page, that's a bit of a bother. But again, for me, I most always read for enjoyment, entertainment.
Yeah.
I will notice now how a story flows and structures. And so that's more what I'm secondarily outside after the enjoyment. That's what I read for.
Yeah.
How other authors structure and write.
Yeah.
More so than the technical elements.
Yeah, I agree absolutely, because I mean, I was talking to the editors last week or a few weeks ago now. Then you can't catch everything; it's impossible. You just, even with all the software in the world, you just cannot catch everything. But I think that adds an additional flavor to the stories as well. As long as it doesn't pull and take you away from the story and take you out of it, I think they're fine. So I don't have a problem with that. No, I'm the same as you. I kind of read for the enjoyment of the story. And I do very much have to switch off my critical mind though, especially if I've written that day. Then sometimes in the evening, because I always tend to read in the evening. That my critical mind, where I've been writing and I've been thinking about how I've started a paragraph or how I've started a scene or something like that. I look for similarities in other writers in that respect, in terms of that kind of structure, and I have to kind of switch that off so that I can then just appreciate and absorb their story, which I do, because there are some great writers out there. I've written and I've spoke to a lot of really good ones. So it's fantastic to see that. So I agree with you absolutely. So where can people connect with you then, Jeff, if they want to sort of reach out to you, connect with you? You've got an Instagram account?
I'm on Instagram. I do have a Wix author website. And let's see, Wix, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. What's the other ones? I'm on Threads.
Yeah.
X Twitter. And I have a Facebook author account, author Jeffrey Yorio, for my book. So do I know what they actually are right now? No. I can send you my the author page link.
Yeah,
I can send you that.
I've got your website and I've got your Instagram links. Okay. I'll certainly put those in the description. Okay. If you want me to add more in, just send them across and I'll put them in. Absolutely. But yeah, so people can reach out to you via your website and or Instagram. So that's important because people are going to want to sort of know a little bit more, which is great.
You could if I don't mind, because I use the account for some, but the email account that you used to contact me, you can pass that on too.
That's great, and that's on your website as well, isn't it? So people can use that too, which is great. So listen, let's leave it there, because I don't want to sort of get you to start talking too much more about the other books that I got coming out. I want people to sort of wait for those. But you must let me know when they're out, and then I can let everybody else know as well, which is something I really like to do. So Jeff, thank you so much for coming today. It's been a real pleasure to finally meet you and to speak to you and kind of understand how your process is. And it's so similar to mine. So it's been a real pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. And thank you for taking the time to include me in your life and with those who follow you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Jeff. So let me know when things come out, when you've got things released again, and we'll meet up again.
Okay. Yes, we will, Paul. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bye. Jeff. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us on another captivating episode of the Page Turnerz podcast. We hope you enjoyed delving into the pages with us, discovering new stories, and revisiting beloved classics. If you're as passionate about books as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback keeps us bringing you fascinating discussions, author interviews, and book recommendations. Remember, the adventure never ends when you have a book in hand. Until next time, keep turning those pages and let the magic of storytelling continue to inspire your imagination. Happy reading.